Retirement is supposed to be the reward for a lifetime of hard work. It is the chapter people dream about through decades of early mornings, long hours, sacrifices, and disciplined saving. Yet what if the biggest threat to your retirement is not something dramatic that appears on the evening news? What if the real danger is something quiet, something unfolding slowly in the background while most people are focused on the wrong things? If you are planning to retire within the next decade, or if you have already retired, this message could be one of the most important financial conversations you will ever hear, because the world that is emerging today is very different from the one previous generations retired into. The strategies that worked perfectly for retirees 20 or -1 years ago were built for a completely different environment. Interest rates were different, government debt was smaller, housing costs were lower, healthcare expenses were more manageable, and the pace of economic change was far slower. Today, many retirees are stepping into an environment where the rules are changing faster than most people realize. The first thing I want you to understand is that retirement is not the finish line. Most people spend their working years believing that once they reach a certain savings number, the difficult part is over. They imagine retirement as a destination where financial worries slowly fade away. But the reality is very different. Retirement is not the end of the financial journey. It is the beginning of a completely new challenge. During your working years, you have something incredibly valuable protecting you: your ability to earn income. Every month, money enters your life through work. If costs rise, if inflation increases, or if unexpected expenses appear, you still have the ability to earn, adjust, and recover. The moment retirement begins, that protection changes. Instead of relying on future earnings, you begin relying on assets you accumulated in the past. Suddenly, every financial decision becomes more important because you are no longer building the pool, you are drawing from it, and that changes everything. One of the biggest misconceptions retirees have is believing that the number they see in their retirement account is their true security. It feels comforting to look at a large account balance and think that the future is guaranteed. But the number itself is not what matters. What matters is purchasing power. Your security is not the amount of money you have. Your security is what that money can buy for you over the next 20 or 30 years. Imagine having $1 million in retirement. It sounds impressive, but if the cost of living doubles during your retirement years, that $1 million effectively loses half of its purchasing power. The number may remain unchanged on paper, but its ability to support your lifestyle declines significantly. This is the silent risk that many retirees underestimate. Inflation does not destroy wealth overnight. It slowly erodes it year after year until one day, people realize their money no longer provides the lifestyle they expected. Think about how much everyday life has changed over the last 30 years. The cost of groceries, healthcare, utilities, insurance, transportation, and housing has increased dramatically. A dollar that felt powerful decades ago buys far less today. The process happened gradually, which is exactly why it was so dangerous. Most people never noticed the changes while they were occurring. They only noticed after the transformation was complete. Now imagine that same process continuing throughout the next 20 years of retirement. That is why inflation matters so much more to retirees than it does to younger workers. Younger workers often receive raises, promotions, and new opportunities that help offset rising costs. Retirees usually do not. Their savings must carry the burden alone. What makes the coming decade particularly challenging is that several powerful economic forces appear to be moving in the same direction. Government debt continues, reaching levels that would have seemed unimaginable in previous generations. Around the world, governments are spending more than they collect and financing the difference through borrowing. While debt itself is not immediately catastrophic, History shows that excessive debt eventually creates pressure on currencies, interest rates, and economic stability. Governments rarely solve debt problems through simple repayment. More often, they manage them through a combination of inflation, currency devaluation, and financial policies that reduce the real value of what they owe. For retirees living on fixed savings, that environment can be especially difficult because the value of their money may decline faster than expected. The challenge becomes even greater when inflation appears alongside slower economic growth. Economists call this stagflation. It is one of the most uncomfortable economic environments because it combines rising costs with weak economic momentum. In normal periods, economic growth often creates opportunities that help offset higher prices. In stagflationary periods, those opportunities become harder to find. Retirees can find themselves squeezed from both directions. Living expenses continue rising while investment returns become less predictable. This is one reason why many traditional retirement strategies may require adjustments in the years ahead. The assumptions that worked in previous decades may not work as effectively under different economic conditions. One of the most valuable lessons I have learned from studying economic history is that prediction is often overrated. Many people spend enormous amounts of time trying to forecast exactly what will happen next. They want certainty. They want precise answers about markets, inflation, interest rates, and economic cycles. But history teaches a humbling lesson. Even the smartest investors, economists, and policymakers regularly get major predictions wrong. The future rarely unfolds exactly as expected. That does not mean preparation is impossible. It means preparation should focus less on predicting the future and more on surviving multiple possible futures. The goal is not to know exactly what will happen. The goal is to build resilience regardless of what happens. That idea leads directly to one of the most important principles in retirement planning: diversification. True diversification is often misunderstood. Many people believe diversification simply means owning several investments, but real diversification means owning assets that respond differently to changing economic conditions. If all of your investments depend on the same economic outcome, you are not diversified. You are making one large bet disguised as many smaller ones. Genuine diversification means creating a portfolio that can withstand multiple forms of economic weather. Some assets perform well during economic expansion. Others perform better during periods of uncertainty. Some help protect against inflation. Others provide stability during deflationary environments. The purpose of diversification is not maximizing returns in perfect conditions. The purpose is surviving in perfect conditions without suffering devastating losses, protecting wealth during periods of currency weakness and inflation. Real assets, productive businesses, and precious metals have often served as forms of financial insurance. They may not always be the highest performing investments during strong economic periods. Protection when monetary conditions become more challenging. The goal is not to bet everything on one asset class. The goal is to ensure that your financial future is not entirely dependent on the continued strength of any single currency. Most people focus almost entirely on the size of their savings pool. They spend years trying to maximize account balances. But retirement is not simply about accumulating assets. It is about creating sustainable income. A large portfolio can disappear surprisingly quickly if withdrawals occur at the wrong time. This is especially true during market downturns, when retirees are forced to sell investments during periods of declining prices. They permanently reduce the future earning power of their portfolio. This phenomenon has damaged countless retirement plans over the years. The problem is not necessarily market volatility itself. The problem is being forced to sell during volatility. That is why income-producing assets can be so valuable, whether through dividends, interest payments, rental income, or other sources of cash flow. Reliable income creates flexibility. It allows retirees to meet living expenses without constantly selling portions of their portfolio. During difficult market environments, that flexibility becomes extremely important. Instead of being forced to liquidate investments at unfavorable prices, retirees can often rely on income streams while allowing long-term assets time to recover. This simple structural difference can dramatically improve retirement outcomes over long periods of time. Another essential component of retirement security is maintaining adequate liquidity. Every retiree should have access to a meaningful emergency reserve. Life is unpredictable. Medical expenses arise unexpectedly. Family situations change. Economic conditions shift. A cash reserve provides breathing room during stressful periods. It reduces the likelihood of making emotional financial decisions under pressure. The value of liquidity is not measured by investment returns. Its value comes from providing stability when uncertainty appears. People who maintain adequate reserves often have more freedom, more confidence, and greater resilience during difficult periods. The final lesson I want to leave you with is this: successful retirement is not about achieving perfection. It is about avoiding fragility. The most financially secure retirees are not always the wealthiest. Often, they are simply the most prepared. They understand that the future contains uncertainty. They accept that markets will fluctuate, economies will change, and unexpected events will occur. Rather than trying to predict every twist and turn, they build systems designed to endure them. They diversify intelligently. They preserve purchasing power. They generate reliable income. They maintain liquidity. Most importantly, they avoid making emotional decisions during periods of fear. The coming decade may present challenges unlike those faced by previous generations of retirees. But challenges do not automatically lead to disaster. With thoughtful planning, disciplined execution, and a focus on resilience rather than prediction, retirees can position themselves to navigate uncertainty successfully. The goal is not to fear the future. The goal is to prepare for it, because in the end, the people who preserve their financial security are rarely the ones who predicted the future most accurately. They are the ones who built their lives in a way that allowed them to succeed regardless of what the future brought. There is another reality about retirement that very few people talk about openly, and yet it may determine whether your savings last 20 years or disappear much sooner than expected. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with working hard. It has nothing to do with how disciplined you were during your career. It has to do with understanding risk correctly. Most people think risk means losing money. They think risk is a stock market crash, a recession, or a sudden economic crisis. But for a retiree, the greatest risks are often the ones that never appear on television. They are slow-moving forces that quietly weaken a retirement plan year after year until the damage becomes impossible to ignore. One of those forces is longevity. For most of human history, people did not have to plan for retirement periods lasting 25 or 30 years. Today, many people do. Advances in medicine, healthcare, nutrition, and living standards mean that millions of retirees will live much longer than previous generations. At first glance, that sounds like wonderful news. In many ways, it is, but financially, it creates a challenge that previous generations rarely faced. The longer you live, the longer your money must last. A retirement that lasts 10 years requires a completely different strategy than one that lasts 30 years. Many people underestimate this reality because they focus on reaching retirement rather than sustaining it. Imagine two individuals who retire with exactly the same amount of savings. One person lives 10 years in retirement. The other lives 30 years. The second person must stretch their resources across 3 decades of changing economic conditions, rising healthcare expenses, and unexpected life events that requires a level of financial resilience that many retirement plans simply do not possess. Longevity is a gift, but it is also a responsibility. The possibility of a longer life means retirees must think beyond short-term comfort and focus on long-term sustainability. Healthcare costs represent another challenge that deserves far more attention than it usually receives. Many retirees spend years preparing for market risks while giving surprisingly little thought to medical expenses. Yet healthcare can become one of the largest financial burdens in later life. Medical costs rarely rise at the same pace as general inflation. In many cases, they rise faster. Treatments improve, technology advances, life expectancy increases. All of these developments create benefits, but they also create expenses. A single major medical event can significantly alter a retirement plan. This is why resilience matters. A retirement plan should not only survive ordinary years, it must also survive extraordinary years. Another issue that receives less attention than it deserves is sequence of returns risk. The phrase sounds technical, but the concept is surprisingly simple. Consider two retirees with identical portfolios who earn identical average returns over 20 years. Most people assume they will finish in similar financial positions. Surprisingly, that is not always true. The order in which returns occur can dramatically change outcomes. If a retiree experiences strong returns early in retirement, followed by weaker years later, their portfolio may remain healthy. But if poor returns arrive during the first few years while withdrawals are already taking place, the damage can be difficult to reverse. The portfolio loses assets early, reducing its ability to participate in future recoveries. This is one reason why market declines can be particularly dangerous during the early years of retirement. Younger investors often have decades to recover from temporary setbacks. Retirees do not always have that luxury. Every dollar withdrawn during a downturn is a dollar that can no longer participate in future growth. This reality reinforces a lesson that many people learn too late. Protecting against major losses can be just as important as pursuing gains. Retirement success is not only about making money, it is about avoiding situations that permanently reduce your financial flexibility. When people think about wealth, they often imagine growth. They imagine increasing balances and expanding portfolios. Growth is important, but retirement introduces a different objective. Preservation becomes equally important. The transition from accumulation to preservation is one of the most significant psychological shifts a retiree must make. During working years, volatility can feel like an opportunity. During retirement, excessive volatility can feel like a threat. The mindset must evolve accordingly. A successful retiree understands that protecting what has already been built is every bit as important as generating additional returns. One of the mistakes many retirees make is concentrating too much of their wealth in areas they understand best. This tendency is natural. People trust what feels familiar. If someone spent their career in a particular industry, they may feel comfortable investing heavily in that sector. If someone achieved success through real estate, they may place the majority of their wealth there. Familiarity creates confidence. Unfortunately, confidence is not the same as diversification. Concentrated wealth can create hidden vulnerabilities. A retiree's financial future should not depend entirely on the success of one industry, one company, one region, or one economic outcome. Diversification may sometimes feel boring, but boring is often exactly what retirement requires. History repeatedly demonstrates that economic leadership changes over time. Industries that dominate one decade can struggle during the next. Countries that appear unstoppable can experience prolonged periods of weakness. Technologies that seem revolutionary can eventually become obsolete. This is why humility remains one of the most valuable qualities an investor can possess. No one knows with certainty which assets will outperform over the next 20 years. No one knows exactly how inflation, interest rates, technology, demographics, and geopolitics will interact. The future remains uncertain. The wisest response is not overconfidence. The wisest response is preparation. Preparation also means recognizing that emotional discipline often matters more than investment intelligence. During periods of market stress, fear becomes contagious. News headlines amplify anxiety. Experts offer conflicting opinions. Predictions multiply. In those moments, even intelligent people can make damaging decisions. They sell quality assets at the bottom. They abandon long-term plans because short-term conditions feel uncomfortable. They mistake temporary volatility for permanent loss. The financial consequences of these emotional reactions can be severe. This is why structure matters. A well-designed retirement plan reduces the need for emotional decision-making. It creates a framework that remains effective even when emotions become difficult to manage. Think about how pilots operate during turbulence. They do not redesign the aircraft in the middle of a storm. They rely on systems, procedures, and preparation completed long before the turbulence arrived. Retirement planning should follow the same principle. The time to prepare is before uncertainty appears. The time to build resilience is before resilience becomes necessary. Once a crisis begins, options often become more limited. Preparation creates flexibility. Flexibility creates confidence. Confidence helps people remain calm when others panic. One of the greatest advantages retirees can give themselves is financial simplicity. Complexity is often mistaken for sophistication. People assume that more complicated strategies must be superior, yet complexity frequently creates confusion, higher costs, and greater opportunities for mistakes. Many successful retirees rely on surprisingly simple principles. They understand their assets. They know why they own them. They maintain adequate reserves. They avoid excessive debt. They focus on long-term objectives rather than daily market movements. Simplicity does not guarantee success, but it often improves the odds. Debt deserves special attention because it can dramatically increase financial fragility. Debt is not inherently bad. Used wisely, it can be a useful tool. However, retirement changes the equation. Debt obligations continue regardless of market conditions. Loan payments continue regardless of investment performance. A retiree carrying significant debt may discover that financial pressure increases precisely when flexibility decreases. Reducing unnecessary debt before retirement can improve stability and reduce stress. The fewer obligations competing for retirement income, the greater the ability to adapt to changing conditions. Perhaps the most important lesson of all is understanding the difference between wealth and lifestyle. Many people assume that preserving their lifestyle requires preserving every habit, expense, and expectation developed during peak earning years. Sometimes that is possible. Sometimes it is not. The retirees who adapt most successfully are often those who remain flexible. They distinguish between what truly creates happiness and what merely creates expense. They focus on experiences, relationships, health, and purpose rather than constant consumption. Financial security is not only about numbers, it is also about expectations. People who align their expectations with reality often discover that retirement can be deeply fulfilling without requiring extraordinary levels of wealth. As you think about the years ahead, remember this: retirement is not a test of prediction. It is a test of preparation. You do not need to know exactly what inflation will do. You do not need to know where markets will be next year. You do not need to know the precise timing of the next recession or recovery. What you need is a structure capable of surviving multiple possibilities. The future belongs not to those who predict perfectly, but to those who prepare intelligently. And in retirement, intelligent preparation can make the difference between constant financial anxiety and lasting peace of mind. Now I want to talk about something that almost nobody discusses when they talk about retirement, yet it may be one of the most important factors determining whether a person enjoys financial freedom or spends their later years worrying about money. It is not a stock market issue. It is not an inflation issue. It is not even a government policy issue. It is a behavioral issue. The truth is that many retirements fail not because people lacked money, but because they made decisions under pressure that slowly weakened the foundation they had spent decades building. Human behavior can become either your greatest financial asset or your greatest financial liability, especially during retirement. Think about what happens when markets become volatile, headlines become frightening, television experts begin making extreme predictions, friends start sharing stories about losses, social media fills with fear and uncertainty. Under those conditions, even rational people can become emotional. The desire to protect ourselves is natural. Unfortunately, acting on fear often produces the exact opposite result. People sell assets after they have already fallen. They move money into cash after damage has already occurred. Then they wait for certainty before investing again. The problem is that certainty usually arrives after prices have already recovered. This cycle repeats again and again throughout history. Markets fall, fear rises. Investors sell, markets recover. And the same investors wonder why their results disappoint them. Retirement makes this challenge even more difficult because retirees are often more sensitive to losses than younger investors. A 30-year-old investor may view a market decline as an opportunity. A 70-year-old retiree may view the same decline as a threat to their lifestyle. That emotional difference matters. It changes behavior, it changes decisions, and over time, it can change outcomes. This is why a successful retirement strategy must be designed not only to survive economic challenges, but also to survive emotional challenges. A plan that looks perfect on paper but causes panic during difficult periods is not a good plan. A good plan is one you can actually follow when conditions become uncomfortable. One of the most powerful concepts in investing is understanding the difference between volatility and risk. Most people use these words interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. Volatility simply means prices move up and down. Risk means the possibility of permanently losing purchasing power. An asset can be volatile without being truly risky. Likewise, something that appears stable can be surprisingly risky if it quietly loses value over time. For retirees, understanding this distinction is critical. The goal is not to eliminate every fluctuation. The goal is to avoid permanent damage to long-term financial security. Consider cash as an example. Many people view cash as completely safe because its value does not fluctuate dramatically from day to day. But if inflation averages several % annually for many years, cash steadily loses purchasing power. The account balance remains the same, but what that balance can buy declines. The loss happens slowly enough that many people barely notice it, yet over 20 or 30 years, the effect can be substantial. This illustrates an important lesson. Stability and safety are not always the same thing. A retirement portfolio should seek both stability and protection against long-term erosion. This brings us to another challenge facing retirees today: the possibility of lower future returns. For much of the last several decades, investors benefited from powerful tailwinds. Falling interest rates, globalization, technological innovation, and expanding asset valuations contributed to strong investment performance. There is no guarantee those conditions will continue at the same pace. Future returns may be lower than historical averages. If that happens, retirement planning becomes more demanding. Strategies that relied on optimistic return assumptions may require adjustments. This does not mean investors should become pessimistic. It means expectations should remain realistic. One mistake many retirees make is assuming that what worked during the last 20 years will automatically work during the next 20 years. History suggests otherwise. Economic cycles change. Interest rates change. Demographics change. Technology changes. Political priorities change. Every generation faces a unique set of opportunities and challenges. The future rarely resembles the past as closely as people expect. Successful retirees understand this. They remain flexible. They adapt when necessary. They focus on principles rather than predictions. Flexibility is one of the most underrated forms of wealth. When people think about financial security, they often focus exclusively on money. Money matters, of course, but flexibility matters too. The ability to reduce expenses temporarily, delay large purchases, adjust travel plans, or modify spending habits can significantly improve retirement outcomes. Flexibility creates options. Options create resilience. Resilience reduces stress. A retiree with flexibility often enjoys greater peace of mind than someone with a larger portfolio but rigid financial obligations. Another area where flexibility becomes valuable is housing. For many families, their home represents the largest asset they own. Housing decisions can have enormous consequences during retirement. Some retirees choose to remain in large homes long after those homes meet their practical needs. Others downsize and free up resources that improve financial flexibility. There is no universal answer. The right decision depends on personal circumstances. However, retirees should view housing not only as a place to live but also as an important component of their overall financial picture. Every dollar tied up in maintaining unnecessary expenses is a dollar unavailable for other priorities. Community also plays a larger role in retirement than many people realize. Financial discussions often focus exclusively on investments and savings, yet some of the happiest retirees are not necessarily the wealthiest. They are people with strong relationships, meaningful activities, supportive communities, and a clear sense of purpose. Financial security matters tremendously, but money alone cannot create fulfillment. Retirement is not simply a financial transition. It is a life transition. People who prepare for both aspects often experience the greatest success. Purpose deserves special attention because retirement can create an unexpected challenge. Many people spend decades identifying themselves through their careers. Their work provides structure, social interaction, goals, and meaning. When work disappears, some retirees discover that financial independence alone does not automatically create happiness. They have freedom but lack direction. The most successful retirees often replace employment with purpose. They volunteer, mentor others, pursue hobbies, travel, learn new skills, spend time with family, or contribute to their communities. Financial planning should support these goals rather than exist independently from them. Let me share another lesson that history teaches repeatedly. Wealth preservation is often more important than wealth maximization. During working years, people naturally focus on growth. Growth matters because time remains available to recover from mistakes. Retirement changes the equation. At that stage, avoiding catastrophic losses becomes increasingly important. Imagine two retirees. One earns slightly lower returns but avoids major losses. The other earns higher returns during good years but experiences severe losses during bad years. Over time, the first retiree may actually achieve better results because preserving capital provides a stronger foundation for long-term success. This principle explains why many experienced investors become increasingly focused on balance as they age. Balance is not exciting. It rarely generates headlines. It does not promise extraordinary gains. But balance provides something far more valuable: durability. A durable portfolio survives changing conditions. It survives inflation. It survives recessions. It survives political uncertainty. It survives market corrections. The objective is not perfection. The objective is endurance. As we look ahead to the coming decade, uncertainty will remain a constant companion. Nobody knows exactly how economic conditions will evolve. Inflation may rise or fall. Markets may boom or struggle. Governments may change policies. New technologies may transform industries. Global events may reshape economic priorities. Uncertainty is unavoidable, but uncertainty does not have to be frightening. It only becomes dangerous when people ignore it or pretend it does not exist. The retirees who thrive in uncertain environments are usually the ones who embrace a simple truth. Preparation matters more than prediction. They do not spend their lives chasing perfect forecasts. Instead, they build financial structures capable of adapting to multiple outcomes. They maintain diversification. They preserve liquidity. They generate income. They protect purchasing power. They remain flexible. Most importantly, they stay calm when others panic. At the end of the day, retirement is not about beating the market. It is not about outperforming neighbors. It is not about achieving the highest possible return. Retirement is about creating a life where financial concerns do not control your decisions. It is about having enough resilience to weather storms without losing sleep. It is about protecting the freedom you spent a lifetime earning. And that freedom is often built not through dramatic actions, but through consistent, thoughtful decisions repeated over many years. The next decade will bring opportunities. It will bring challenges. It will bring surprises. That has always been true throughout history, and it will remain true in the future. The question is not whether uncertainty will arrive. The question is whether you will be prepared when it does. And the good news is that preparation remains entirely within your control. As we come to the final part of this discussion, I want to bring everything together into one simple idea. Throughout this entire conversation, we have talked about inflation, government debt, market uncertainty, healthcare costs, longevity risk, emotional decision-making, diversification, and income generation. These topics may seem separate, but they are all connected by one common principle. Retirement success is not determined by a single investment, a single prediction, or a single decision. It is determined by the strength of the structure that supports your financial life. Strong structures survive difficult conditions. Weak structures eventually break under pressure. Think about the way engineers design bridges. They do not build a bridge based on the assumption that perfect weather will last forever. They expect storms. They expect strong winds. They expect stress and pressure. The bridge is designed to survive conditions that have not yet arrived. Retirement planning should work exactly the same way. The goal is not to create a financial plan that succeeds only when everything goes right. The goal is to create a plan that continues functioning even when things go wrong. Unfortunately, many people approach retirement from the opposite direction. They spend decades focusing almost entirely on growth. Every decision revolves around making the portfolio larger. Bigger numbers become the objective. Bigger balances become the measure of success. Then retirement arrives, and suddenly the rules change. Growth remains important, but preservation becomes equally important. Income becomes important. Stability becomes important. Flexibility becomes important. Many retirees struggle because they continue using an accumulation strategy during a stage of life that requires a preservation strategy. This leads directly to what I believe is one of the biggest retirement mistakes people make. It is a mistake so common that millions of people never even realize they are making it. The mistake is believing that retirement security comes from having a large pile of money. That sounds reasonable, but it is incomplete. True retirement security does not come from the size of the pile. It comes from the reliability of the system built around that pile. Imagine two retirees who both have $1 million. On paper, they appear equally secure, but look closer. The first retiree depends almost entirely on selling assets to generate spending money. Every year, they must liquidate a portion of their investments to pay bills. If markets perform well, everything seems fine. But if markets struggle during the early years of retirement, they are forced to sell assets at lower prices. Their portfolio gradually shrinks. Their flexibility decreases. Their anxiety increases. Now consider the second retiree. They have the same amount of money, but they structured a significant portion of their assets to generate income. Dividends, interest payments, rental income, and other cash flows provide much of what they need for living expenses. During difficult market periods, they are less dependent on selling assets. Their portfolio has time to recover. Their stress remains lower. 10 or 15 years later, the difference between these two retirees can be dramatic, even though they started with exactly the same amount of money. This is why income matters so much. Income creates breathing room. Income creates flexibility. Income reduces the pressure to make emotional decisions during difficult periods. A retiree who can cover a meaningful portion of living expenses through reliable cash flow often has a significant advantage over someone who depends entirely on asset sales. The goal is not necessarily to eliminate withdrawals completely. The goal is to reduce dependence on them whenever possible. Another important lesson involves expectations. Expectations have a powerful influence on financial happiness. Two people with identical financial resources can experience completely different levels of satisfaction, depending on what they expect from retirement. One person may feel wealthy, and other may feel anxious. The difference often has less to do with money and more to do with perspective. This does not mean people should ignore financial realities. It means they should recognize that contentment and security are influenced by both resources and expectations. One of the healthiest approaches to retirement is focusing on what you can control. You cannot control inflation. You cannot control interest rates. You cannot control market performance. You cannot control political decisions. You cannot control global events, but you can control your spending habits. You can control your savings rate before retirement. You can control diversification. You can control debt levels. You can control risk management. You can control emotional discipline. These are the areas where attention produces the greatest results. The media often creates the impression that successful investing requires constant action. Every day brings new predictions, new forecasts, and new reasons to change direction. Yet, history suggests that many of the best financial decisions involve patience rather than activity. Constantly reacting to headlines rarely improves long-term outcomes. More often, it increases stress and encourages mistakes. Successful retirees understand that not every headline requires a response. Not every market movement requires action. Sometimes the smartest decision is simply staying committed to a well-designed plan. There is another point that deserves emphasis. Retirement planning is not just about surviving financially. It is about living meaningfully. Money is a tool. It is an important tool, but it remains a tool. The purpose of financial security is not accumulating the largest possible account balance. The purpose is creating freedom. Freedom to spend time with family. Freedom to pursue interests. Freedom to contribute to causes you care about. Freedom to enjoy experiences without constant financial anxiety. When people lose sight of this, they sometimes sacrifice years of happiness chasing numbers that ultimately fail to provide fulfillment. The most successful retirees I have observed share several characteristics. They are prepared but not fearful. They are disciplined but not rigid. They are optimistic but not reckless. They understand uncertainty without becoming obsessed by it. They focus on resilience rather than prediction. Most importantly, they recognize that retirement is a journey rather than a destination. Financial planning does not end on the day you retire. It evolves. Circumstances change. Priorities change. Needs change. Successful retirees adapt thoughtfully as life unfolds. As you think about the future, remember that every generation faces challenges that feel unprecedented. Previous generations worried about wars, recessions, inflation, market crash, political instability, and technological disruption. Today's retirees face their own unique concerns. But despite all these differences, one principle remains remarkably consistent throughout history. People who prepare calmly usually outperform people who react emotionally. Preparation beats panic. Discipline beats fear. Structure beats prediction. The coming decade may bring inflationary pressures. It may bring periods of economic weakness. It may bring market volatility and policy changes. Or it may surprise us in ways nobody currently expects. The future is always uncertain. That uncertainty is not a reason for fear. It is a reason for preparation. The objective is not building a retirement plan that depends on perfect conditions. The objective is building a retirement plan that remains effective across imperfect conditions. So, if there is one message I want you to remember after this discussion, it is this: do not measure your retirement by the size of your account balance alone. Measure it by the strength of the structure supporting it. Measure it by the resilience of your plan. Measure it by your ability to generate income, preserve purchasing power, remain flexible, and stay calm during uncertainty. Those qualities often matter far more than any single investment decision. Years from now, when people look back on this period, many will focus on the events that occurred. They will analyze market movements, economic policies, and global developments. But the retirees who succeed will likely attribute their success to something much simpler. They prepared before preparation became urgent. They built resilience before resilience was tested. They focused on principles instead of predictions. And because of that, they were able to navigate uncertainty without allowing uncertainty to control their lives. Thank you for spending this time with me. Time is one of the most valuable resources any of us possess. Unlike money, time cannot be replaced once it is spent. The fact that you have invested your time thinking seriously about your financial future tells me something important. It tells me that you are already doing what many people never do. You are preparing. You are asking questions. You are taking responsibility for the future you want to create. And ultimately, that may be the greatest retirement advantage of all. Not a specific investment, not a market forecast, not a prediction about the economy, but the willingness to prepare thoughtfully, act calmly, and remain focused on what truly matters. Because the people who protect their retirement most successfully are rarely the people who know exactly what the future holds. They are the people who build a financial life strong enough to handle whatever future arrives. Take care of yourself. Protect what you have spent a lifetime building. Stay patient, stay disciplined, and remember that the goal is not merely reaching retirement. The goal is enjoying it with confidence, security, and peace of mind for many years to come.